hello everybody. Welcome to yet another Batman Arkham Shadow Q&A. I'm producer Matt Walker, and I'm here with...
And I'm Ryan Payton, the director of Batman Arkham Shadow.
They're going down.
Come on, look at the city.
Well, Ryan, let's see here. Since the last video we did, it's been a couple weeks. Last time we had a chance to sit with our buddy, Dr. Eric Bender, and really talk about, like, you know, all of the kind of psychological stuff that we had in the game.
Yeah, it's such an incredible response to that. It's a really large credit to this channel where you're not afraid to go into the comment section. Everybody's so supportive and excited about what we're doing.
It's great.
Hopefully that'll be the case for this video. And you and I just came back from a quick trip out to the States, right? To Las Vegas.
That's right. We went to Las Vegas. We went to DICE, right? What happened there?
And we attended the DICE Awards, and thankfully we came away with the best VR game prize of 2024.
Good job.
So big congrats to you. Big congrats to the team. Big congrats to, I think like the players too, who helped us make the game what it is.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I was relieved and happy and just honored for us to be able to get up on stage. I was also confused
really?
as I'm we get up there. We've got our big crew up there on stage, and people are kind of like reacting to something that's happening on stage.
Well, I think they just really liked your suit.
Well, my suit was cool,
But
to my right, I didn't know that you were kind of like amping up the crowd. You were doing the Matt Walker thing. So
honestly, you know, I was doing that, but I couldn't hear whether they were responding or not.
They were. So I was like, why are people hooting and hollering?
I think it's your suit, dude.
Yeah, it was. Man, that was just so much fun. So
nice.
Really happy we got to do that. And then we came right back here and have been trying to finish up work on the biggest update we've done to the game, version 1.4, the Game of the Year update for Batman Arkham Shadow, coming out on Thursday, February 27th. So much of this is based on the feedback, the guidance we've received from players. And so, yeah, we're going to go over the details of that update. We're going to be talking about some lore things and kind of just opening up more than we've ever done in any of these videos, because this is very likely our last Q&A video that we're going to be doing, because this is the last big update we're doing to the game as well. We have to move on to future stuff. So yeah, it's a little bit bittersweet. We're going to be going over some cut content.
Ooh, nice.
We're just going to have a lot of fun with this video, as we always do.
If we're going to talk about 1.4, maybe first it makes sense to talk about 1.3, kind of review what was in that.
We should do that, because we didn't do a proper kind of Q&A about 1.3. So the headliner for 1.3, which came out last month, was the New Game Plus, which was a huge request from players. We always knew we wanted to do it, and I think the team did a fantastic job with it. It's not just a New Game Plus where you can play the game over again with your progression intact, but we remixed every single encounter so the game feels fresh, even when you're playing it for that second time.
That's right, man. So, and that's what makes it, you know, worth it to play New Game Plus, right?
Absolutely.
It's a new experience. Well, then on top of that, we also added Infinite Predator and Infinite Combat maps.
We did, yeah. And that was another thing that players requested. They wanted to see how far they could go. And what a different experience it is playing the Infinite Combat and Predator challenges when you're physically playing as Batman, as opposed to just kind of laying back on the couch and playing with the controller. It's like physical endurance.
It's a workout.
Not just mental, right? And really cool to see just how far people are going with it.
And you were kind enough to give me the opportunity to put in a couple more POIs in the game.
Well, no, you were kind enough to actually open up Unity and add some of those POIs that we had recorded, but we didn't have time to add them into the game in time for launch for 1.0. So thank you for doing that. It's just more fun things to scan in the world when you're in Detective Vision. It just gives you more context in the world, so that was really cool.
Well, and so in terms of stuff that we've recorded, not just that, but then also there's at least one more voice memo.
We added a new voice memo, and we also added a new character to the character viewer.
That's right.
To pay off this new epilogue that we added. Post credits. We're not going to spoil it. We've got a spoiler gate coming up, but we're not going to spoil that. But it's a payoff of something we were asked since launch, which is like, who's that character in the projector room in the Monarch Theater?
Okay.
So we made that new scene that takes place after the events of Batman Arkham Shadow.
There you go.
Mainline. So that's really cool.
Yep. And then last but not least, we got some really nice rain in the game, don't we?
We got some great rain. So big shout outs to Ezra Hanson-White, one of the original team members of Camouflage. I've been working with him for over a decade. Just such an honor. And he wasn't happy with the way that the rain was looking in the base game. For the record, nobody complained. Everybody thought the game looked great, but he wanted to make it look even better. And you're going to see that rain really featured in the new maps we're going to be talking about related to 1.4 in just a moment.
All right. Well, speaking of 1.4, shall we kick it off then?
Yeah, you're right. So new maps, first of all.
All right.
We've got brand new maps that the team's been working on since the launch of the game. And we went to the community and we asked them, we said, hey, what are your favorite Predator maps from the previous Arkham titles? We're not going to recreate them as is. We're going to take the layouts and take inspiration from those maps. And that's what we did. And then we recreated them in the world of Batman Arkham Shadow.
That's right. That's right. And there were 3 of them, right?
That's correct.
Quiet Waters from Origins.
Yep.
There's Natural Selection from City.
Yep.
And then Silent Night from Asylum.
Arkham Asylum, yes,
right?
Exactly.
And it's fun. Yeah, I mean, we took all 3 of those maps. Obviously, we tried to replicate the layout as best as we could with our mechanics, right? But, you know, they're using our art assets. And so we had fun also kind of trying to give a little bit of context for, you know, where is this? Where could this be?
Exactly,
you know?
yeah.
And what characters might occupy this space?
Yeah, exactly. The team is always very thoughtful, and the way they approached like the lore, the context, and creating new art assets too. This was fun for the artists, right? This is their opportunity to create new things after shipping the game, and this is what our art team has mainly been focused on since launching Arkham Shadow. So love to celebrate that. Can't wait to see what people think about these 3 new Predator maps. In addition to the other things that we're adding in version 1.4. Including extreme difficulty mode.
Extreme, yep, that's right. Extreme. And then it's not just the difficulty either, right? We actually have 3 different combat maps and 3 different Predator maps that also get extreme versions of their maps.
That's right.
Well, right.
And then extreme is what powers another feature that was asked by the community, and we listened and we added it, which is the I Am the Night mode, which originated in Arkham Origins, which is kind of like a hardcore mode, permadeath. You're playing the game, extreme mode, and if you die, you're toast. Yeah, you start over. So it's only for the most elite players. And I don't know if you and I have even discussed this, but one of the reasons I was so adamant about having I Am the Night mode as the final update is that as we're starting to walk away from the core development of this title, I wanted to leave the community with like this challenge,
nice.
Right? To see just what happens over the next few months and years as more and more players take on the I Am the Night challenge. I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves over time.
No doubt. You know, and it's going to be fun because, you know, as you mentioned, it's related to extreme difficulty, right? Because
yes.
we have this new extreme difficulty, and then I Am the Night takes that difficulty, adds the permadeath.
That's right.
There's a couple more additions though. We also have a couple more game overs, and now we have very specific game overs for that.
Yeah, we recorded new game overs for I Am the Night. And on the subject of permadeath and not being able to make a mistake, that is something of a wrinkle or a feature of a new thing we added just last minute, which was inspired by Scarecrow's Nightmare from Arkham Asylum. In this mode that we're adding to Arkham Shadow, you can't get hit.
Yep. And of course, you're talking about the new combat challenge map that we added. Like you said, it's based on the Scarecrow's Nightmare challenge map from Arkham Asylum.
Yes.
This one we're calling Crane's Nightmare.
That's right.
Now, obviously, you don't have Scarecrow in our game, right? So then how does that work? I mean, you don't have a giant Scarecrow there.
If only we had another giant character to set this all into. And this is actually just, again, like the community kind of laid this out for us. They're like, you could do something like Scarecrow's Nightmare
That's right.
in your world with Shadow Batman, in that whole context, and you're fighting the imps rather than the skeletons. And a big credit goes to the team, especially Nathan Scott, who saw those comments from the community and said, you know what, I think we could do this.
That's right.
And so really, really excited to see how people react to that new feature as well.
It's a lot of fun, right? And especially because it's not wave-based like the original one,
Yes.
right? It's going to be another one of those Infinite ones. But we do have a couple little twists. Maybe we won't, actually.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, it's we've got a little bit of a twist on it.
Well, and then there were a couple echoes that we had written, and I think we got a chance to record originally, but we didn't get a chance to get in the game until now, right?
That's right. So yeah, you were instrumental in helping getting those echoes in the game, the remaining ones. I think it's more than a couple.
There's maybe about half a dozen or so.
Yeah, so
like that.
that's good job on that.
Well, and and then speaking of collectibles or Easter eggs, there's one other Easter egg. I don't know how much detail we want to go into here, but it's got a great story behind it.
Yeah, well, I think it's got a good development story and a good in-world fictional story.
It's got
behind
both.
It too,
It really does. It really
which
does.
is when you and I are reviewing the game, there's this moment as you're playing as matches when you are developing this rapport with Falcone, and it's one of my favorite kind of story threads throughout the game. Is this kind of budding friendship and almost paternal relationship Matches is having with Falcone.
Yep.
And it's very much inspired, I think it's safe to say now, by the dynamic of in this film called Donnie Brasco between Johnny Depp and the Al Pacino character. there was a moment there where Falcone, completely trusting Matches, tells him about the safe that he has, gives him the combination for the safe, or the password for it, and reveals that there's all this incriminating evidence there. And he tells you where it's located. And it was always bothering me. You knew it was bothering me big time.
I remember.
That if players go and search for that in max security, we didn't pay it off.
Yep.
And it really bothered me. And there was just no time in the development cycle to get that in for 1.0. But the team, again, rallied and did something really cool that also satisfies another thing, I think, from the community that they've been asking for that I'm not going to spoil.
Right.
So we kind of killed two birds with one stone on this feature.
That was great. That was great. And then, of course, all kinds of adjustments and bug fixes, right?
That's right. So, 3,300 check-ins from the team since 1.3. Yep. So they keep cooking. Over 500 bug fixes, and some bug fixes related to OS versions of for the Quest 3. So, if you're playing the game, and especially if you're doing those infinite combat challenges, I highly recommend you make sure that you are always on the most recent version of the OS, right? Because that actually will reduce some of the issues you might be facing.
All right. Enough about 1.4. I think it's time to get into the Q&A. What do you think?
Yeah, let's get into the Q&A. This is now officially the spoiler zone, so you're exiting the spoiler-free zone. and you're going to be hearing some great questions from the community that we've actually been holding on to for, in some cases, many months, because I just didn't feel like it was the appropriate time to talk about these things.
Yep.
But we're going to be more open than we've ever been.
Yep, exactly. All right, well, I'm going to kick it off then. From James Popcorn, FRFR on YouTube, what comics were you inspired by?
Well, I mean, I read so many Batman comics over the course of Arkham Shadow's development, and even beforehand because I was a fan. But you look at some of the classics like Dark Knight Returns from Frank Miller. That whole idea of like the society just feeling like there's like these outcasts in society who don't feel like their needs are being served. The fact that that is set in a very in a heat wave of Gotham City inspired the 4th of July setting for Arkham Shadow. And even like small things, like there's somebody in Gotham City holding a sign that says "We are damned," and asked the team to add some graffiti in the world of our Gotham as kind of like a nod to that.
That's great. Well, how about like Eye of the Beholder, for instance? Eye
of the Beholder was a big inspiration. A lot of the things that we did with Harvey Dent and Two-Face were directly inspired by the comics, like Eye of the Beholder, like All-Star Batman from Scott Snyder, where he dives into the story of Bruce and Harvey as foster brothers. It was one of those comics that I wanted to reference when we were promoting the game pre-release, and I thought, I can't talk about this because it's going to spoil so much stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one other comic that I was not expecting to be so influenced by, which was Batman 66, the very first appearance of Two-Face from 1942, if I'm remembering correctly.
Wow, okay.
And in the first 2 pages, it solved a problem that was haunting me and the team on this game for over a year.
No kidding.
Which was, how is that courtroom scene going to play out? How do you get the acid onto Harvey Dent and have the player be a participant?
Yeah.
It got me more excited about a pitch that the team had given me that initially I wasn't into.
No kidding.
I thought that will never work. And then I read the first 2 panels of the origin story of Two-Face, and I thought, okay, this is actually, if anything, it's an homage now, and I can now see it. So I wasn't able to see it before, and I was able to see it because of that comic.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I mean, speaking of Two-Face, then, we have a question from Absolute Carnage 777 on YouTube. What made you interested in telling a Two-Face story? And from what I can recall, ever since I joined the project, we always had that courtroom scene.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, early on, I knew we were going to have Two-Face. I knew we were going to have that scene in the courtroom. But we had so many different ideas about who the main villain of the game was going to be, and it just kind of came to a head when we were exploring the Jungian shadow. And I just love stories with duality. And I've always thought that Two-Face in lots of media, not just in the Arkham franchise, can sometimes feel like there's so much more room to explore. And the fact that Troy Baker performs Two-Face is also an opportunity for me to partner up with Troy, who's somebody I've always respected. And I knew that he likes to go really deep into his characters and just allowed us to do that. So for all those reasons and more, I was just so excited, so enamored by the idea of just going all in with Two-Face.
From Jim Lindsay on Discord, how did it feel to bring Roger Craig Smith back as Arkham Batman?
Well, shout out to Jim, who's on the Discord and is always a source of fun and positivity. And the same can be said for Roger Craig Smith. I approached Roger very early on in the development of Arkham Shadow, and contrary to some people's theories, it was actually still at the time when Kevin Conroy was all with us.
That's right.
We didn't know that he was sick.
That's right.
But at the time, I was actually just thinking, hey, I'm looking at the Arkham franchise. We're earlier in Batman's career. It's story-wise, we're the next step after Arkham Origins, and it just made sense to me that we would call Roger. And thankfully, he picked up the phone and agreed to join the project. And there's so many things on this 4-year development of Arkham Shadow that happened. So many good things that I could never have predicted. And the list is very, very long.
Absolutely.
In terms of like me not knowing that how much I would love interacting with the community behind a game, for example.
Yep.
Another one was like not knowing or thinking that I would just establish these lifelong friendships.
Yep.
With somebody like Roger Craig Smith, where now like we text back and forth like like teenage girls. So
that's great.
It's awesome. We're just super tight now, and not only did he provide a great performance and so into this character and deserves a BAFTA as far as I'm concerned, but yeah, just a great friend.
All right, from Stiller ST on Discord, was playing as matches throughout the majority of Arkham Shadow always the plan?
No, that was not the plan, and that shouldn't be the case unless you really love playing as Matches Malone.
Oh,
and
maybe
and you're running around the prison and talking to every single character. Even if you did that, I still don't think the majority of your time would be played as Matches Malone. But that was something that we were so careful about throughout the development. You know this, Matt Walker, right? You remember TTB?
TTB, Time to Batman.
Time to Batman. What's TTB? Like, other than Time to Batman?
That's right. Well, exactly. I mean, you know, as you're talking about, you know, we had this idea for a long time, right? That, okay, we're going to kind of have this duality in the gameplay. You know, there are these opportunities where you can have the action and then you can have the story and you can go back to the action, right? And so, you know, to do that, you have Batman and you have matches.
Now, because we're being so open, I can say that leading into the launch of Arkham Shadow, the most called out concern from the team from a creative perspective was matches. They were terrified. They were worried that people would be disappointed when they're going to play as matches, and thankfully that ended up not being the case. And I think in large part because we learned the lessons from my core inspiration for really wanting to lean into Matches Malone, which was Metal Gear Solid 2. And it was the big Raiden reveal.
The big Raiden reveal, exactly.
the big switcheroo.
Right, exactly. And you know, and we even referenced that in the marketing, right? We said we're actually not going to put matches out front in the marketing,
right?
Because we're gonna pay homage to this in a sense as well, but we're gonna learn from what happened back then, right?
Exactly. And what happened back then was, famously, is that people thought they were buying a game where you're playing as Solid Snake, and the vast majority of the time you're playing as Raiden, and people were disappointed, and we wanted to avoid that. So you play as Batman for the majority of Arkham Shadow, but it really kind of freshens it up, and you get a different perspective.
Absolutely.
I'm just so proud of how we approached the matches idea, and credit should go to Warner Brothers in DC and Ames Kirshner in particular, who gave me the initial ideas. Like, what about Matches Malone? Because
I was going to ask,
and it's because early on I said how much I wanted to set the game in a prison, in Blackgate Prison. And that's where he said, "What do you think about matches?"
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I was going to ask which came first, the chicken or the egg? But it was the prison.
It started with the prison. and because it invited all these questions. How are you running around the prison as Batman? Absolutely. At night, you can understand, but during daytime, when the prisoners are out. And so that's where he offered up the idea of Matches Malone.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, from Ethan on Discord, what was your inspiration for Jonathan Crane's new origin story? I really enjoyed the idea of him being fascinated with the Shadow.
You know, the approach that we took with Jonathan Crane, with Harleen Quinzel and others, is subverting expectations to the extent that I think a lot of players would expect that in these origins of these characters that end up becoming supervillains, that they're bad from the start. And to me, that's not as interesting as exploring what these characters, like what their motivations are initially, and showing the evolution of these characters and having kind of deep development. And so for Crane, for Quinzel, and for others, that was like the approach that I asked the writing team to take, and it was hard. But I think we ended up in a really interesting place where Crane might not be the most sympathetic character in the story, but I think you understand more about his motivations and where he came from, which I think makes him just a more complex and interesting character.
Absolutely, absolutely. And frankly, you know, I mean, that was kind of the impetus for us actually reaching out to Dr. Eric Bender, right?
It was, yes, that's
so
right.
that we can get his take on, okay, if we're going to do this and we want to understand how they become this way, you know, how does all that work?
Exactly.
All right, rapid fire from Scrudge5352 on YouTube. Arkham Knight introduced in-universe technical designations for the main bat suits to use in the story. Does Batman's suit in Shadow have a number designation?
It does have a number designation, and it is added into the game. We didn't have it at launch, so maybe you didn't notice it there, but we've snuck it into the world since then.
All right, from Bull1797 on X. What's the deal with Cyrus Pinckney and Arkham family timelines being incorrect, Ryan Payton?
Well, the deal is I was getting messages about this after the launch of Arkham Shadow, and I started to get really worried. I thought, because I was so proud of what our team did, where it felt like we bat 1,000, like we got it all right.
Right.
And that's so hard to do given the complexities of the previous Arkham titles. And I thought, when I first received that message, I thought, oh shoot. I remember looking at Jay Howell's, his explanation, and I checked all of his math in terms of how the Cyrus Pinckney backstories were working across the different games and how we were approaching it. But maybe I got it wrong.
Right.
And I went back to Jay, and he's like, no, we got it right. And so I told the community, don't worry, we got it. And they came back and said, no, you don't. It still doesn't make sense because in Arkham Origins, it stated that Cyrus Pinckney was involved in the construction of Arkham Asylum in the 1800s.
That's right.
However, in Arkham Asylum, it stated that he was involved in the establishment of Arkham Asylum back in 1921.
That's right.
So which is it?
Right.
And so we, just like a number of other things that we encountered in the Arkham timeline, there are some elements that are incongruent, that don't actually add up as well as you'd like it to be. And so what we felt was, it wasn't our job to choose between which one we liked or we felt like it was accurate, is that it's our job to make sure that we're still part of the glue that keeps us all cohesive. So we went to action, worked with DC, and came up with, I think, a really cool way to resolve this continuity issue at the launch of Arkham Shadow. But that didn't seem to be enough. So what we did was we started to add more elements into the game post-launch to kind of help explain and hint a little bit more about how that all works.
Right, be a little more explicit about it.
Exactly, and I think the most recent example of that is in 1.3, in the epilogue with the newspapers. We give more hints about how it all works, but I'm not going to spell it out here because it's pretty cool.
All right, from Danny on Discord. Why did you change Dick Grayson's origin, Ryan Payton?
I don't know if we changed his origin. I think, in my opinion, we fleshed out his origin. We respected the existing lore, didn't we? Because we looked so closely at how City and Knight describes the origin of Dick Grayson.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, because about a year and a half ago or so, we got all the narrative guys in a room. And we said, okay, let's really make sure that like what we're trying to do here with Dick Grayson makes sense and it lines up with the lore. Because in City, for instance, Tim Drake's bio mentions that Bruce was at Haley's Circus the night of the accident.
Correct.
Right?
Which, yeah, we're completely compatible with that, and we respect that. And that was just so important to me for everything we did.
All right, from Yeet on Discord. Were Riddler trophies ever planned?
Riddler trophies were actually never planned. And this is coming from me, so if you're upset that there's no Riddler trophies in Shadow, it's my fault. And it's also why we didn't have much at all of Joker in the game. When I was researching and playing the Arkham games like you were doing over and over and over again, and just trying to understand like what we could do to help enhance this franchise or do something new and interesting, I saw two very consistent messages from the community. One, they love Joker, but maybe it's time to have a different main villain.
Okay.
And also some people were saying that they were kind of tired of the Riddler trophies.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, we can address both of those concerns.
Yep.
But I also knew that if we were going to not feature Riddler as the source of the trophies, that would disappoint some people. So we tried to have the Rat Idols invoke a lot of the fun of the Riddler trophies. And in fact, I think Bill Green and the designers did a fantastic job with those puzzles, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's a fresh coat of paint, and it's also integrated into the world of the Rat King and the rats. And so I'm really happy with what we did, but it was a creative risk, and I knew that not everybody was going to be happy with it because Riddler is fun.
Right.
And Wally does a great job.
People care, man. Cool, well, exactly, because, our next question is from Fernando Bronze on Facebook. Where is Edward Nygma during the events of Arkham Shadow?
Well, play 1.4, version 1.4, and you might find out.
Ooh, all right. Okay, rapid fire from Steve Schmeider, 8487 on YouTube. Was Ratcatcher considered for a bigger role, maybe even a boss fight?
Yes.
All right, rapid fire from Yeet on Discord. Did Bronze Tiger have a bigger story presence at some point?
Yes.
All right, not rapid fire.
Was there ever a point where you could fight against Bronze Tiger in the game, and it was actually pretty cool? Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Getting away from the rapid fire aspect there, but yeah, that was pretty cool, let me tell you. Well, speaking of stuff that was cut, from Jasper on Discord, were there any elements that didn't make the cut?
There was a lot of elements that didn't make the cut, including one that was really plaguing the team for so long, which is Joe Cartwright.
Joe Cartwright.
Matt Walker, what's Joe Cartwright?
Well, okay, so, for anyone that has played the game, right, on day 3, there's a part where Falcone wants you to go get some information, right? And so he says, okay, go meet Joe. He's going to take you in a laundry cart to get somewhere, right? And so in the game, basically the way that happens is you go up to Joe and then it fades down and then it fades up when he takes you, right?
That's right.
That was a whole sequence.
That was a playable sequence that was really cool, and I really fought hard for the longest time to try to keep it, but it just ran into a lot of technical issues. It felt a little bit uncomfortable actually in the headset to be in that cart with the little window as Joe's like pushing you through. But as you know, a big reason why we were so excited about it was that it created more of a rapport with Joe.
Yes.
Right. In addition to the shop, the commissary, you could overhear Joe making this deal with a tiger guard, slipping him some money so you can get past this checkpoint.
Usual spot, yeah? I can grab it.
Nah, you don't want to do that. One of the new guys didn't get the memo about the meatloaf. Got sheets in here that look like a massacre.
It was a really cool sequence. It felt unique. It was different than what you had experienced up until that point, but just for development reasons, we had to cut bait.
Right. I mean, that's hard to do in VR too. Is another thing.
Yeah.
And so then there's other stuff that we cut too, right? Like for instance, I believe there was an enemy type, it's like a bomb guy, right, where you had to use explosive gel to actually take that guy out.
Yeah, that one hurt too because I really want to take advantage of the extra fidelity that players have in VR with the gel launcher. Because unlike the flat screen games where you don't have a lot of control about exactly where you're placing it, you could sneak behind an enemy, pull out the gel launcher, shoot it right into the small of their back, and then that would then trigger this, and then you hit the explosion, and it takes and his armor blows off. Yeah. Such a cool feature. It was working. The reason we cut that one was just it felt like yet one more thing to tutorialize, teach the player, and we were already feeling that at that point in the game, players could be overwhelmed by all the new things we were throwing at them. So it was a tough cut, but I think the right one to make.
All right, from Amy Ryber on X. Why can't we draw any shape we want with explosive gel, Ryan Payton?
Well, okay, let's be honest. Why do you think, right? Like, just imagine on the internet what people are going to be drawing.
Well, what you can draw. If you could draw anything you want in the game.
Yeah, what's going to happen? But that was a consideration. It was a major consideration. But to be fair, another reason why we went with the design that we landed with the game, which I think was the right move, is because when we did allow players to just use the explosive gel however they wanted to, and they weren't doing drawing inappropriate things, what they were doing is that they would just walk up to a wall, just spray it as quickly as they possibly could, and then blow it up, and it just didn't feel like Batman.
Yep, totally.
Because you remember from the other Arkham titles, he's drawing a bat symbol,
in
right?
everyone, right?
Nobody was drawing a bat signal. It was always just the bare minimum, and it just felt lazy. It didn't feel like you're being the hero. So I love the solution that we came up with.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's great. All right, from Oblivion 2054 on Discord. Who came up with the idea for the Harvey and Bruce dream sequences? How were they technically done?
Well, they were technically done by Territory Studio, which is a partner we've had for many years. They worked with us on Iron Man VR, and they worked with us, obviously, on Arkham Shadow. And they brought those moments to life with some great production guidance from you, Mr.
That's right. But you were still the guy that actually came up with the idea, right?
I came up with the initial idea not based on anything that I was getting inspired by from the comics or any kind of writing or learnings. It was just one of those moments that I try to avoid having, but it was just pure creative intuition.
I'd say so. But you also remember you had kind of two things you were trying to achieve here. One was, on previous titles, you've had instances where the dev team had trouble like getting to making certain things that you knew you'd want to make, right? And so you said, let's preempt that. Let's have somebody else create essentially pre-rendered video then.
Yeah.
That can satisfy that.
Exactly. And before you get to the second thing, just to interject, that the inspiration behind that is actually how the Call of Duty games were built for many years.
Oh, no kidding.
Is that they had these top-down kind of territory-like sequences where they would zoom in on maps and have voiceover sequences that they would use to tie together these maps and these missions they were creating, these bespoke, almost like completely disconnected experiences. Those were the connective tissues.
Okay.
And they would develop them in the final months of those games.
Okay.
So I thought about that as a way for us to kind of have like an insurance policy to help kind of tie the story together.
Oh, that's really cool.
And we very purposely developed those towards the end of the game to be able to tie certain things together, right?
Right. It took us, yeah, exactly. It took until fairly far along before we said, okay, here's definitely what we're going to go with for that stuff, right? But I mean, that's so interesting that you're talking about these top-down sequences for Call of Duty, because your other thing with these was that you wanted to do something interesting and unique and new in VR, right? With stereoscopic vision.
That's right.
And you ended up coming up with this idea that it's going to be this top-down thing for the dream sequences, but I'm sure that had nothing to do with Call of Duty.
And nothing. Well, I don't think anything to do with Call of Duty. Maybe more just like this creative intuition I had. I remember having a dream when I was in high school. From a top-down perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that was some source of inspiration. And then there was this happy accident with the dream sequences, because you're witnessing from a top-down perspective the childhood story of Bruce and Harvey. And then later in the game, when you're going through the Scarecrow or the Crane section in this kind of nightmare version of it, you are seeing these scenes play out in a kind of a twisted nightmare version of it, but you already know what's happening. Like, you already know what was more of like reality, and now you're seeing the kind of twisted version of it where Bruce's shadow is inspiring and influencing the drama that you're seeing. So you get to see it from two different perspectives, which I thought was really cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was very cool. All right, from 9Keen18208 on X. What happened to the mixed reality enhancements you planned for Batman Arkham Shadow?
Yeah, that was one thing that we announced, that we're going to add some MR elements to mixed reality elements to Arkham Shadow. And it's just one of the few things we just weren't able to get around to. We could add it, but I just didn't feel like it was going to be as impactful as I wanted it to be. So we built Arkham Shadow as a VR first game, right? We weren't thinking about mixed reality as we're developing it. And I thought, hey, if we're going to do mixed reality, we should probably be thinking about it from day one and really lean into that very cool tech. So yeah, we decided pretty recently we're going to have the developers behind the MR enhancements work on these other great features for 1.4. And so yeah, we're not going to be adding any kind of MR elements to the game.
All right, from Dark Sheep 123 on Discord, I loved the art style of the game. Is there any chance you guys might do an ArtStation drop?
Well, as a matter of fact, if you do some searches online now, our artists are posting things on ArtStation, on Instagram, on LinkedIn and other areas where they're just uploading all these great concepts, 2D pieces, with working with Warner Brothers and DC for all the approvals, and now they're able to go live. And so, yeah, that's really fun to see these guys just kind of posting these from time to time. So yeah, keep an eye out for them. There's some really great pieces.
All right, from War Mace 117 on X. When is the soundtrack releasing? I really want to add it to my playlist.
After long last, with to coincide with the release of version 1.4, the official soundtrack for Arkham Shadow is going to be released.
All right, I'm looking forward to that. From Orient Force 56 on Instagram, what aspects of Arkham Shadow were your favorites to work on?
There's so many things to talk about, but one that I find myself really missing now in February of 2025, roughly 4 months after the release of the game, are nighttime sessions reviewing the game with Bill Green, right? You and I we'd do a full day of work. We'd order some food from Uber Eats. We'd eat that, call up Bill, who's in London. Yep. We're in Japan. It's his morning, it's our evening. I get in a headset. We've got the game up on the big screen. You're taking notes. Bill's chiming in, giving us direction, his insight based on all of the experiences, shipping all of the Arkham titles from Rocksteady. Yep. And we are calling out bugs. We're calling out direction. We're coming up with great ideas. And we're learning from this Arkham master, Bill Green.
Absolutely.
Right? And it was exhausting. it made for very long days. The poor team in Seattle that was on the receiving end of the hundreds, if not thousands of tickets you were writing up per night.
Yep.
Would have to go triage those the following morning, and then it gets all disseminated out to the team. It was very efficient, but it was exhausting, and it was also, to me, just looking back, just so fun.
Oh, it was. Well, I mean, like you're saying, I mean, it was so cool to learn all this amazing stuff from Bill.
Yeah.
You know, I had a list at one point of all of the Billisms, you know,
Yes.
or, you know, stuff like, you know, how in Arkham you want to start from a position of power and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so many of those, great Billisms, as you say. To kind of close out the story, you and I were in the office the other day, and it was getting kind of late, and we were looking over at the table that we usually would sit at to have dinner before we would do these long sessions.
Yep.
And you and I were both kind of just reflecting on the fact that, we're not going to be doing that for a while, you know? And I do miss that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, and then the final question for the series, Ryan Payton, from Mr. Caputo on Discord. Any plans for DLC where we explore what happened after the events of the Day of Wrath?
Well, we do explore what happens after the Day of Wrath in some of the newspaper props we have in the post-epilogue scene in 1.3 that we launched last month. But I think this is more to the point, more to the question. It's what else can the team do to keep adding content to Arkham Shadow? And with 1.4 coming out this week, it is really the final big update, as far as we understand. Like the dev team is moving off of Arkham Shadow after many months of post-launch support. So I feel very fortunate that Meta, Oculus Studios, Warner Brothers, DC, and our colleagues at Camouflage have just been behind just supporting this game. Thousands of check-ins, thousands of improvements, so many new features. But it is time to move on, and it's sadly going to be the last Q&A we do for, I would assume, for a very long time as well.
Yep. Yeah, you know, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss, obviously, we've had so much fun making this great game. We've had so much fun interacting, obviously with the dev team members, but then obviously with these great people in the community.
Yeah. With
Batman Arkham videos.
Yeah.
You know, it's
such a great supporter. It's been, you've done a great job hosting these, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how you pronounce all the usernames correctly, so big credit to you. Big credit to our friends here at Meta and the Tokyo office who have allowed us to borrow their stage and how well it's lit and shot and how it sounds. It's, again, like I was saying, I did not expect to love doing this as much as I did on this title.
Right.
And I look at this as a great honor. And I'm very thankful that we were given the opportunity to continue to enhance and improve the game. And so when we start to say goodbye, I'm not saying that we won't do smaller updates to the game. If we find some bugs, we'll fix it. But it's probably not going to be a 1.5. It's going to be more like a 1.4 or 1, 2, whatever. Yeah. That I just feel like just so happy and privileged that we could send off this game and put it into a really good state. And now it's in the hands of the community. Good luck with I Am the Night mode. And trying to get through that extreme difficulty. Keep talking to us, keep interacting with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I completely agree. And you know what? I think that is a fantastic way to cap it off. Well, with that said, I'm Matt Walker, and this is
Ryan Payton.
We thank you for watching our series.